For more on one of those key points that Andrew touched on, the rising petrol prices and the spike in inflation, I caught up with Peter Khoury from the NRMA. Where do these prices sit in historical terms?
Well, they have broken every record that we have ever seen in this country. And yeah, good afternoon. Unfortunately, it's not great news in Australia. We have broken the record for petrol prices at the end of 2021, and we are now on par with those prices, or have been at least, over the last week or so, depending on where you live. We've either done it, or you've either done it already, or you're heading in that direction. So it's not great news.
And is it fair to say, and I think you said something similar over the last 24 hours or so, everything that could go wrong in terms of pressure on petrol prices has gone wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the perfect storm. Unfortunately, what we are seeing globally are factors that are obviously beyond the control of the Australian government or anyone else here. Not even the US administration was able to have an impact on trying to convince OPEC and other oil-producing countries to increase supply. So that's been the first issue, and probably the most significant, and has been now for the last 12 months as the global economy started to come out of COVID lockdown. Demand for oil has peaked and spiked quite considerably, and supply just consistently has failed to meet demand as those oil-producing nations continue to artificially hold back supply to put the price up. In addition to that, you just need to go around the world. Russia, a major oil-producing country, crisis with the Ukraine. In the Middle East, you've got Houthi rebels attacking oil refineries in the UAE. You've got the Northern Hemisphere winter, a colder than usual winter, which is increasing demand for diesel because diesel's used as a heating oil. So globally, anything that could go wrong is. And domestically, oil, the margins, the profit margins, the gap between the wholesale and the retail price are the highest they've ever been.
So does that indicate price gouging?
Well, it indicates profit margins. They're making more profit than they have, and they're doing it in the middle of a pandemic. And it is particularly bad in Sydney. At the end of last year, while price cycles in the capital cities that have price cycles were falling, we saw the average price in Adelaide drop to $1.42. In Melbourne, it dropped to $1.49. And in Sydney, it dropped to only $1.56. So not only are we seeing prices not fall as far as they should, they are falling very slowly. When they go up very quickly, and they have consistently gone higher than we have expected. So indeed, throughout the pandemic, there is no doubt that margins have been higher than they have ever been. And while the oil companies will tell you that volumes of fuel sold have fallen, this is hardly the time you would think to be cashing in at the levels that they have been.
Particularly given those global forces already driving up the wholesale price. So is there more that governments can do in that sense, Peter Khoury, in terms of putting pressure on those retailers to keep a lid on the prices?
Yeah, well, look, the ACCC in the past have had some success, working obviously in partnership with, alongside the NRMA at, naming and shaming and calling out oil companies when we know that margins start to creep well above what we would normally expect in Australia. And we monitor these prices very closely. So, before COVID, it was consistently around the 11 or 12 cent mark. Now it's 19. So, the ACCC can certainly, they've had success in the past where they've just named and shamed. And, no company wants to be called out by governments for doing things in the middle of a pandemic when the country is looking at them to perhaps show a bit of restraint. So that has worked in the past. But, as I said, beyond that, well, the US administration, the most powerful country on earth, has largely failed over the last 12 months to convince those oil-producing countries to increase supply levels. And so if they haven't been able to do that, Australia is obviously going to face challenges as well. But certainly at the local level, when we know that there are particular companies that are going to go above and beyond what is normally the case with profit margins, then, there is no harm in calling them out and expecting them to show a bit of restraint.
Peter, does the NRMA have any advice to motorists? Obviously, as we started this interview, we discussed the fact that it hurts at the bowser at the moment when you've got to fill up a tank, particularly the big family movers and so on. Have you got any advice on how people can shop around and at least look for the best possible price in their area?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So this is one area where we definitely have an advantage in many parts of the country now. So it started in New South Wales in 2016. The NRMA called for real-time data reform, which meant that every service station in the state had to reveal their prices in real time every minute of the day. And that information would then become available to the public. And that's exactly what's happened in New South Wales, since 2016. So you can get the price of every service station as you're about to head out to fill up in your local neighbourhood on whatever journey you happen to be taking. And that information is available through the New South Wales government's website or the NRMA's app. Now, we've got similar reforms introduced in most parts of the country with the exception of Victoria and the ACT. So everywhere else, you can still do 30 seconds of research and you can save yourself a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, these numbers are pretty startling. In Sydney right now, about 39% of all service stations are charging over $1.80 a litre, and about 13% are charging below $1.65. So obviously giving people the information they need to find those 13% of service stations across Sydney at less than $1.65 is the real way to make a difference. I don't know why Victoria and the ACT haven't adopted similar reforms yet. We've managed to get it in most parts of the country now, and it can make a significant difference. I mean, the gap between the cheapest and the most expensive in a lot of these cities is 50 cents a litre, and that is a huge difference. So giving people the power they need, the information they need to make the right choice will go a long way to helping families save money.